The first red flag wasn't the land. It was the pause. The kind of pause that hangs in the air a second too long, like someone deciding how much truth you can handle. I was sitting in a leather chair that felt too expensive to be comfortable, staring at a map spread across a desk bigger than my kitchen table. Blue lines. Green markers. A massive shape outlined in black. 3,200 acres. Private lake. Timber. Grazing land. Mineral rights. All mine. Inherited. And my heart was racing for all the wrong reasons. Because nobody hands you a legacy that big without strings attached. The attorney finally cleared his throat. Your uncle was particular. That word again. Particular. It sounded polite. Safe. In my experience, it usually meant trouble. I nodded, pretending I wasn't overwhelmed. Pretending I wasn't thinking about how my Uncle Gerald and I used to fish together when I was 10. How he never married. Never trusted institutions. Never liked being told what to do. That should have been my clue. The ranch, Blackwater Lake Ranch, had been in our family since the late 1800s. Before paved roads. Before zoning boards. Before anyone thought a clipboard gave them authority. And now it was mine. Or at least, that's what the will said. There is one complication, the attorney added carefully. There it was. The room felt smaller. The ticking clock louder. I didn't interrupt him. I've learned that when professionals slow down their speech, it's because the next sentence changes everything. There is a homeowners association, he said. I laughed. Actually laughed. Because the idea of an HOA having anything to say about a 3,200-acre ranch with a private lake felt absurd. Like telling the ocean it needed a parking permit. I don't understand, I said. There aren't houses. It's land. Ranch land. He nodded. The HOA was formed later. Adjacent development. They claim partial oversight. Claim. Another word that should have stopped me cold. He slid another document across the desk. A letter. Official looking. Sharp language. Bold headings. My name typed cleanly at the top. According to the letter, the HOA believed portions of my inherited property fell under their community influence zone. Influence zone. I felt my stomach drop. They weren't just welcoming me. They were preparing to control me. And the timing? Perfectly predatory. Because according to the date stamp, this letter was sent 3 days after my uncle's death certificate was filed. 3 days. They'd been waiting. I drove out to the ranch that same afternoon. Hours of open road. Mountains rising in the distance. Cell service fading to nothing. The closer I got, the calmer I felt. Like the land itself was reminding me who it belonged to. The gate was still there. Rusted hinges. Familiar creak. I stepped out, breathing in pine, water, dirt, memory. That's when I saw it. A brand new sign staked into the ground near the access road. White. Clean. Professional. HOA notice. My name underneath. Violation pending. I hadn't even unpacked. I hadn't even decided if I was keeping the ranch. And somehow, I was already in trouble. I stood there staring at that sign, realizing something very important. This wasn't about rules. This was about power. And whoever put that sign up thought I wouldn't fight back. They were wrong. I didn't tear the sign down. That's what they expected. Anger. Impulse. A mistake they could point to later. Instead, I took a photo. Then another. Wide shot. Close-up. Date and time stamp. The whole thing felt ridiculous. Standing on land my family had owned for over a century, documenting a plastic threat like it was evidence from a crime scene. Because that's what this was. A quiet one. I followed the dirt road down toward the lake, tires crunching over gravel my uncle had laid himself years ago. The water came into view, smooth and dark, reflecting the mountains like nothing had changed. But something had. At the far end of the road, right where the land met a tree line, there was a truck parked sideways. White. Clean. HOA clean. A woman stood next to it, arms crossed, sunglasses on, clipboard tucked under one arm like a badge of office. She didn't wave. didn't smile. She watched. I stepped out of my truck and felt that strange mix of disbelief and adrenaline. You know the one. The moment where you realize the situation is absurd, but also very real. Can I help you? I called out. She walked toward me like she already owned the answer. Mid-50s. Perfect hair. Crisp blouse. No dust on her shoes, which was impressive considering she was standing on a ranch road. I'm with the Blackwater Ridge Homeowners Association, she said, not offering her name. We've been trying to reach you. That sentence alone made my skin crawl. I just arrived, I replied. This property was inherited. I haven't been contacted. She tapped the clipboard. That's not what our records show. Records? Of course they had records. HOA Karens always do. She proceeded to explain, slowly, condescendingly, that while the ranch itself was historically independent, the surrounding residential development had established an HOA years ago. According to her, certain access roads, water usage considerations, and visual impact areas now fell under their authority. Visual impact. I almost laughed again. You're saying you control my lake? I asked. She didn't blink. We oversee shared environmental assets. That lake is private, I said. It's on my deed. She smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind people use when they think they've already won. That's something our legal team will need to review, she said. Until then, any modifications, usage changes, or infrastructure work require HOA approval. I stared at her. My uncle built this road. He maintained it for decades. She shrugged. He wasn't compliant. That doesn't transfer. There it was. The play. They weren't arguing history. They were rewriting it. She flipped a page on her clipboard and pointed. Failure to comply may result in fines, restricted access, or legal action. Restricted access. To my own land. I asked the question that changed her expression just slightly. Do you have an easement on record? She hesitated. Just for a second. We have community authority, she said instead. That wasn't an answer. I nodded slowly. I'll need everything in writing. Her jaw tightened. You'll receive formal notice, she replied. I suggest you don't make any changes in the meantime. She turned and walked back to her truck without another word. I stood there listening to the engine fade, the silence rushing back in like a held breath finally released. That's when I realized something critical. They hadn't come to welcome me. They hadn't come to negotiate. They came early, before I could settle in, before I understood the land, before I could build a defense. Because HOAs don't attack strength. They exploit uncertainty. And they thought inheriting a ranch made me vulnerable. That night, I sat at the old wooden table in the ranch house, documents spread everywhere. The will. The deed. County map. And one phrase kept repeating in my mind. Community authority. I opened my laptop. If they wanted a legal conversation, I was about to learn their language. By sunrise, I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Anger makes you sloppy. Focus makes you dangerous. I brewed coffee on a stove older than most of the HOA board combined and spread every document I had across the table. Deeds going back generations. Survey maps with faded ink. County stamps that predated their entire community. And that's when the first crack appeared. The HOA map didn't match the county map. Not even close. Their influence zone conveniently expanded right over my access road and brushed the edge of the lake. But according to the county plat, their boundary stopped nearly half a mile short. That wasn't an oversight. That was a land grab. I drove into town and went straight to the county recorder's office. No appointment. No announcement. Just quiet determination. The clerk recognized the ranch name immediately. Oh, she said, eyebrows lifting. Blackwater Lake? I nodded. She leaned in. You're going to want copies of everything. That sentence alone told me this wasn't new. She pulled records from a filing system that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 90s. Easements, right-of-way filings, environmental permits, And there it was. No HOA easement. No shared access agreement. No authority. Not now. Not ever. The road? Private. The lake? Private. The land? Completely outside HOA jurisdiction. I asked her one more thing. Has the HOA ever filed a boundary challenge? She sighed. They try every few years. Usually when property changes hands. Predatory. Predictable. Patient. They waited for inheritances, divorces, elderly owners, moments when people were distracted or grieving. They assumed paperwork fatigue would do the rest. I left with a thick folder and something better than confidence. Proof. When I got back to the ranch, there was another notice waiting. This one taped to my front door. Second notice. Failure to respond. Less than 24 hours. They were escalating fast. I called the number at the bottom. It rang twice. Blackwater Ridge HOA, a man answered. Polite. Too polite. I received a notice, I said calmly. I'm disputing your authority. There was a pause. Then a different tone. Ma'am, the HOA has oversight. Do you have a recorded easement? I interrupted. Silence. I continued. Because I do not see one filed with the county. The line clicked. Hold music. When he came back, he sounded irritated. Our legal team is reviewing that. Translation, we don't. I told him I would be sending a formal response, along with documentation, and that any further notices would be considered harassment. He laughed. Actually laughed. HOAs don't harass, he said. We enforce. That night, headlights appeared on the ridge road. 2 cars. Slow. Stopping. I watched from the porch as silhouettes stepped out, flashlights sweeping the land like they were already inspecting it. One of them pointed toward the lake. The audacity made my hands shake. I walked down the steps and made sure they saw me. Can I help you? I called out. A man stepped forward. Late 40s. Polo shirt. HOA confidence. We're documenting violations, he said. You're trespassing, I replied. He smirked. Community oversight. I held up my phone. County plat says otherwise. His smile faltered. Just a little. You should be careful, he said. HOAs have resources. I nodded. So do landowners. They left shortly after. But I knew something had shifted. They weren't backing off. They were testing how far they could go. And I was done reacting. The next move wouldn't be defensive. It would be decisive. Because if they wanted to challenge ownership, I was about to challenge their existence. The letter I sent them wasn't emotional. That was intentional. HOAs feed on emotion. They bait it, document it, twist it. So I sent fax, certified mail, return receipt, copies to the county recorder, zoning office, and, just for fun, the state attorney general's Consumer Protection Division. Inside the envelope, the original deed chain, county certified plats, a written demand to cease contact, and one sentence that mattered most. Any further interference will be treated as tortious harassment and trespass. Legal language has weight. Even HOA Karens feel it. For exactly 48 hours, nothing happened. No trucks. No notices. No clipboards. I almost believed it worked. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. This is Karen Whitmore, HOA president. Of course it was. Her voice was tight, controlled, clipped. The voice of someone trying very hard not to sound panicked. We received your correspondence, she said. There seems to be confusion. Confusion. That word again. There's no confusion, I replied. Your HOA has no authority over my land. A pause. Papers rustling. Our interpretation differs. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. Interpretation doesn't override recorded law. Her tone hardened. You should understand, she said. The HOA represents hundreds of families. Shared interests. Shared values. And none of them include my ranch, I said. She inhaled sharply. Your uncle was difficult, she snapped. He refused to cooperate. There it was. This wasn't about rules. This was personal. He also refused to be bullied, I replied. I see the tradition continues. Silence. Then the threat. If you continue this path, Karen said, the HOA will pursue legal remedies, liens, access restrictions. We can make this very inconvenient. That's when I stopped being polite. You try to lien land you don't control, I said calmly, and I will file suit for fraud, slander of title, and abuse of process. She laughed, thin, forced. You don't have the resources. I let that hang for half a second. Then I said, my uncle left me more than land. Click. She hung up. That afternoon, a survey crew showed up. Not mine. 3 men in reflective vests began setting stakes near the access road. I drove down immediately. Who hired you? I asked. One of them looked uncomfortable. HOA contract. I handed him the county plat. You're surveying land you don't have permission to be on. They packed up in under 5 minutes. But the message was clear. The HOA wasn't retreating. They were escalating quietly, hoping I'd miss something. Hoping I'd slip. So I did what they never expect homeowners to do. I went public. Not on social media. In records. I filed a quiet title action. For those who don't know, quiet title doesn't make noise. It erases doubt. It forces anyone claiming interest in your property to prove it in court. And if they can't, their claim dies permanently. When the HOA received notice of the filing, everything changed. Emails flooded in. Voicemails. Let's discuss. Let's resolve this amicably. Perhaps there's a misunderstanding. Too late. Because once a quiet title action starts, you can't bluff. You either have standing, or you don't. A week later, I received their counter. Not a defense. A demand. They wanted me to grant an easement for community harmony. Community harmony. On land they didn't own. I forwarded it to my attorney with one line. Proceed. Because the next phase wasn't about stopping them anymore. It was about exposing them. And the HOA had no idea what discovery was about to uncover. Discovery is where HOAs panic. Because discovery doesn't care about confidence, or tone, or how long someone's been in charge. Discovery only cares about paper, emails, minute, invoices, internal discussions no one thought an outsider would ever see. My attorney warned me. This part gets ugly. He was right. The first document we received was an internal HOA email chain titled Blackwater Opportunity. Opportunity. Not concern. Not confusion. Opportunity. The emails went back years. Board members discussing the ranch like it was unfinished business. Talking about how eventually ownership would change. How new inheritors are easier to pressure. How Uncle Gerald had blocked progress. Blocked progress by owning his own land. One message, sent by Karen herself, made my stomach turn. Once the property transitions, we can finally bring the lake under HOA environmental oversight. That access alone increases surrounding property values significantly. There it was, the lake. This was never about compliance. It was about money. The next batch of documents was worse. Draft lien template. Pre-written violation notices. Even a spreadsheet labeled pressure timeline. A step-by-step escalation plan designed to overwhelm new landowners into cooperation before they lawyer up. They had a playbook, and my uncle had refused to play. Which meant, in their minds, he was the villain. My attorney leaned back in his chair when we finished reviewing it all. They're done, he said quietly. But the HOA wasn't acting like it. In fact, they got louder. Karen sent a community-wide email framing me as an uncooperative outsider threatening shared resources. Homeowners I'd never met began sending messages. Some polite, some angry, a few outright hostile. I ignored all of them, because public opinion doesn't matter when the law is on your side. Then came the mistake. The HOA filed a notice of intent to lien against my property. They didn't have authority. They didn't have standing. And they filed it anyway. That single action turned a civil dispute into something much bigger. Slander of title. Fraudulent filing. My attorney amended the complaint within hours, adding damages and personal liability for board members, including Karen. When she was served, she called me. Not as HOA president. As a person. Her voice was shaking. "This has gone too far," she said. "We were just trying to protect the community." "No," I replied. "You were trying to take what wasn't yours." She begged. Actually begged. Asked me to withdraw the suit. Promised the HOA would back off. Said they'd leave the ranch alone. I almost believed her. Almost. Then my attorney forwarded me one last document uncovered in discovery. A draft agreement prepared months before my uncle died. It outlined a plan to absorb Blackwater Lake Ranch into the HOA jurisdiction post-transition. Post-transition. They weren't reacting to my inheritance. They were waiting for it. I sent the document to Karen. No message. No commentary. Just the proof. She never called again. 2 weeks later, the HOA's attorney requested an emergency mediation. That's not confidence. That's damage control. Because once a judge saw those documents, the HOA wouldn't just lose authority over my land. They'd lose credibility. Possibly everything. And the settlement they were about to offer? It wasn't going to be small. The mediation was scheduled for 8 hours. It lasted 90 minutes. That's how fast power collapses when it's built on bluff. We met in a neutral conference room halfway between the ranch and the HOA's precious clubhouse. Long table. Bottled water no one touched. Karen sat 2 seats away from me, eyes fixed straight ahead like if she didn't look, this might not be real. The mediator opened with pleasantries. No one responded. The HOA's attorney spoke first. He didn't posture. Didn't threaten. Didn't even try to defend their authority. He went straight to damage control. "My clients are prepared to withdraw all claims," he said, "and seek a global resolution." Global resolution. That's lawyer speak for please don't destroy us. My attorney didn't reply immediately. He slid a folder across the table instead. Inside were printed emails, highlighted passages, dates circled in red. Karen finally looked down and went pale. The mediator raised an eyebrow. "These were produced in discovery?" "Yes," my attorney replied, "including the pre-inheritance absorption plan." The HOA attorney swallowed. That document changed everything. It proved intent. Not a misunderstanding. Not confusion. A coordinated attempt to seize control of land they had no right to. I spoke for the first time. "This ends today," I said. "One way or another." Karen flinched. I laid out my terms. No easement. No oversight. No future claims, ever. A public retraction sent to every HOA member admitting lack of authority over Blackwater Lake Ranch. Full reimbursement of my legal costs. And one more thing. Karen's resignation. Her attorney turned to her slowly. "Karen," he said carefully, "this is no longer optional." She exploded. "This is outrageous," she snapped. "I've given years to this community." "And abused your position for most of them," my attorney replied flatly. The mediator stepped in, but it was already over. Karen stood up, chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You think you've won," she said, pointing at me. "But you don't understand how HOAs work." I met her gaze. "I understand exactly how they work," I said. "That's why you're about to lose." She stormed out. 10 minutes later, her attorney returned alone. He didn't argue. He didn't negotiate. He asked for a copy of my demands. By the end of the session, every single term was accepted. Unanimously. The HOA board would formally disclaim any interest in my land. The lien filing would be expunged and reported as an error. Legal fees paid in full. And Karen Whitmore would step down immediately, with language in the settlement barring her from serving on any HOA board within the county. When the final papers were signed, something strange happened. The tension I'd been carrying since the inheritance finally lifted. Not relief. Clarity. Because this fight was never really about land. It was about entitlement meeting resistance, about an HOA Karen who believed confidence could substitute for ownership, and about a system that only works when no one challenges it. As we walked out, the mediator shook my hand. "You did everyone a favor," he said quietly. "They won't try this again." He was wrong. They won't try this again with me. But HOAs like this don't disappear overnight. They adapt. They regroup. And sometimes they make one last mistake. Because 2 weeks after the settlement was finalized, I received a call from the county clerk. And what she told me proved this story wasn't finished yet. The county clerk didn't sound surprised. "That should have been my first clue. I thought you should know," she said. "We've been getting a lot of questions about Blackwater Ridge HOA." "Questions? From who?" "From homeowners," she continued. "They're asking why dues increased, why reserve funds are frozen, why the board president resigned without explanation." I thanked her and hung up, already understanding what had happened. Karen didn't act alone. She never does. When the settlement went out, the HOA sent the required retraction email. Dry. Legal. Carefully worded. It admitted they had no authority over my land and apologized for any inconvenience caused by administrative overreach. Administrative overreach. That phrase detonated inside the community. Homeowners started asking for records, minute, budgets, decisions, and once people start looking, they don't stop. Within days, an independent audit was demanded. The audit found exactly what you'd expect: misused funds tied to legal consultations, unauthorized spending on surveys that never should have happened, and a pattern of intimidation used to secure voluntary compliance from property owners near the HOA's boundary. Karen's resignation wasn't the end. It was the beginning. 3 board members followed her out within a month. The HOA's attorney quietly withdrew. The county opened a formal inquiry. And just like that, the same organization that tried to claim my lake couldn't even explain where its own money went. I visited the ranch that evening as the sun set over the water. No signs. No notices. No strangers with clipboards. Just land. Quiet. Honest. The way my uncle intended. I thought about how close I'd come to believing them. To paying a fine just to make it go away. To signing something temporary that would have lasted forever. That's how HOAs win. Not through force. Through fatigue. But this time they pushed too hard. And lost everything they tried to take. Blackwater Lake Ranch remains exactly what it has always been. Independent. Private. Protected. And the HOA? They still exist. Smaller. Quieter. Watched. Because now the entire community knows something they didn't before. Authority only works when no one questions it. So if you're inheriting land, buying near an HOA, or already dealing with a Karen who thinks a clipboard outranks a deed, remember this story. Read the records, ask the hard questions, and don't confuse confidence with control. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be intimidated.